All right, Bill Gailey, Mad Scientist Lab. Wanted to show you guys this amp that I just got done troubleshooting for the past 2 days. It started off as an experiment with some simple tube amp plans for the Real McTube. And if you look up the Real McTube or the Real McTube 2, you can find some schematics on the internet, and it's a great first project to get your feet wet playing around with a 12AX7 and a couple of just wall wart type transformers. And it's a good project. So this originally started as that, and I've added stuff onto it. I put the power amp section in, I've added tone controls, I've tweaked the gain and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, I made it my own design, so it's far removed from the Real McTube project now. And before I get too much into the explanation, do want to give a shout out and a big thank you to Terry at D Labs and also to Uncle Doug. Check those two guys out. Thank you guys. You guys have been instrumental in me experimenting with this and making an amp that has a unique sound for me. So I started playing around with my favorite tube combination, the 12AX7 and an EL84. Added this hideous power supply section in here, and this kind of anemic audio transformer there. But anywho, it's fairly ugly. I'll move you guys closer to the bench and I can give you a quick walkthrough about what this is, and then we'll have a sound sample so you can be amazed at the sound of tubes. Alright, so here we are over at the workbench, and here's this enclosure pulled out from the speaker. Let's see, input, volume, tone control, indicator light, off on switch, and the power cord. Now originally the way I had this thing was I used this transformer to produce the 6.3 volt heater, or the filament voltage, and I cheated because the primary had a 115 input and a 230 input. But I know from well, I know from experience and getting shocked enough that if I put in 115 here at the center tap, yeah, this guy's ground, but this guy gives you 230 volts straight out of it, but it's not isolated. So I shocked myself plenty of times getting this thing hooked up and getting so it could sound pretty good, and it even had a tendency to shock me just touching it like this. Not that it was that much, but it shouldn't have shocked me. So what I did is I got this isolation transformer, which just takes your ordinary 115 input and runs it through and gives you 115 volts on the other side. So it's just 1-to-1. Anyway, so that isolates the wall power supply to the power supply as rigged up as it is to run the tube amp. I do have to say I really did borrow a lot of the design concepts from Terry over at D Labs to make this thing, particularly about the placement of the audio transformer and the power amp and where the speaker connects. On the underside, this is a little messy, but basically the wires coming in from the power supply, these two red ones down here, this is from the isolation transformer, which is connected to the power switch. And let's see, that feeds in to the Jameco transformer and bumps it up to 230, which is this red wire coming out here. Got the ground coming out here, a full wave rectifier, and resistor capacitor network to smooth out the ripples to give me a good about 230, 240 volt DC. Now the rest of the circuit for the tube amp, I had this printed circuit board made to experiment with these two tubes, and while the values are kind of anemic and kind of a mix of tantalum capacitors and carbon film and carbon composition resistors, it works. A lot of people don't like using the tantalum capacitors, especially in a high voltage situation, because they can burn out pretty easily. But at the voltage they seem to be getting hit in here, it actually runs it into a state where it's the higher voltage lowers the capacitance value. So if anything, this lets through a little bit more of the higher frequencies and tapers off the bottom end. But it's still a pretty beefy sounding amp, as you guys will see. Alright, so that's kind of it for that. Let's get this thing turned on and you guys can hear a little sample of it. Now, I'm just using the lapel mic here. This guy's loud enough, it's close to 5 watts. I'll get this thing warming up. Takes a couple of seconds. Oh, one thing I do want to mention before I start playing is that this tone control is your typical bass and treble kind of thing, like you would find on a car stereo. But I actually borrowed the values and the tone control circuit from a Big Muff, and I don't know, for this little amp, this seemed to be a good sound for it. So that's what you're hearing there. And now I'm going to lay the lapel mic in front of the amp so you can hear the speaker more than my shirt rattling up against the guitar body. All right, making sure that the light is on. If the light is on, you can hear me.